it becomes quite important to have your business process quite planned out. And not just that, but it needs to be evaluated often. It needs to be monitored. It needs to be audited to make sure that it's still doing the right thing.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process. Welcome to another episode of Process Pioneers. Today I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with Remo Prinsloo. He is a lead solution architect for Accella. And I guess being a lead solution architect, he works or deals with their processes on a day-to-day basis. So I'm really interested in today's conversation. Remo, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Daniel.
Great. So what I might do now is I'll pass the ball to you. If you can talk to me a little bit about, I guess, where the interest in process management came from. I know that your role doesn't necessarily, you're not a process specialist from an official title point of view. You're not a process manager, so to speak, but talk to us where that interest in process management and process improvement, I guess where the original interest came from and then how that's developed over time. Give us a little, I guess, brief timeline or history of your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So I'm pretty much an operations guy. I come from a tech background primarily. So my involvement from process management has been from a technical point of view all my life. So more from a software engineering type of solution. So always been in the background. So if you can think about process management is a fundamental part of actually developing software. And sometimes there's a huge lack of it in some ways. And if you think about the specialist areas that you have to deal with software development, it becomes more and more important in that way. So my primary interest in it sort of has been peaked in the last 5 to 10 years maybe, where I've been more in senior type roles. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is that that you need to manage a lot of steps, and you need to manage a lot of people, and you need to manage a lot of tasks and activities that happens all the time in these sort of environments. Yeah. And there's a continuous drive to improve these sort of things. If it's not just for saving time, but obviously saving a lot of money, saving a lot of effort that's involved, and constantly improving and automating things.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about I guess definitions here, because someone might be listening right now that they've heard BPM or the idea of process management, and there are a number of different, I guess, definitions and descriptions out there. But if someone came to you and they said, Remo, how would you describe process management? Like for the organization I'm working in, how would you define process management?
Yep, sure. I think it's probably a term that can be described depending on the situation that you find yourself in any given organization. And from my point of view, business process management always been taken from the side of how do you generate value? How can you generate value out of anything? Even from, if you have a process in place, every little thing in that process needs to be able to generate value. And if it doesn't, then you either have to change it or you have to get rid of it. So from an operational point of view, it's the constant evaluation of tasks in order to increase the value and decrease complexity.
Mm-hmm. Right, great. And talking about process management, obviously, as you were talking just before, you're talking about the different value that I guess managing processes can bring to an organization. For someone that's within an organization that they're obviously they're not the key decision maker to, I guess, embark on any process exercises or anything like that, process management or improvement exercises. But when for that person, when talking to senior management, when talking to the CXO level, the decision makers, what should they be saying, or how should they be pitching the management of processes, and why the company should spend time, effort, energy, resources, investing in understanding their processes, and I guess the continuous improvement. I guess one more thing I'll add is that there are plenty of organizations that have embarked on documenting processes for it only to sit there and collect dust. But obviously there's a difference between doing the exercise once and it being pushed to the side and never looked at again, compared to documenting, managing your processes, but then making those iterative, incremental improvements through, as a continuous exercise, I guess.
Yeah, sure. And it's an important thing as well. I mean, if you look at it, my experience from the start, I've usually been from an operational point of view, involved in most of the companies I've worked for. I've seen a multitude of business processes being put in place, the management of it being put in place, strategies and architectures and those sort of things being put in. From my experience, the thing, if you want a business process to work, you don't start it from the top, you start it from the bottom.
Right.
You have to get the people that's actually doing this work involved, and that's where you start. Right. Before you actually take any suggestions to a senior management, you have to have evidence. I mean, all their decisions are made on evidence and stuff. So if you come with a theory on how to change things, it's not going to carry the same weight that if you actually go to them and say, listen, I've been doing this process for the last 6 months, and here is where the benefit of these things are going to lie, and this is how much it's going to cost the company to roll it out if we do that, and then they start listening to you. So if you do that, and then you won't struggle getting the people involved as well. I mean, because they're already involved in it, they're already doing it, they're already testing these type of things. It becomes a much easier thing to implement in the company.
Right. And talk to us a bit about, I guess, doing things on a project level and compared to something that's enterprise-wide, because obviously managing, there have been some organizations I've spoken with that in terms of managing processes, it's very much on a project to project basis, where it's got to start, it's got to finish. Once the project's done, they've finished with the processes, but maybe they're not necessarily understanding, well, what's the entire organization operating, or what are the processes, what's the process architecture, and then what's that, I guess, cross-functional view between all the different departments and that hierarchy structure that we talk about in the org chart. So yeah, talk to us a little bit about the value that can come from that perspective or from that view.
Sure. So I haven't dealt with a lot of enterprise side of rolling out processes into that domain, but I think it becomes quite important when you start looking at, especially when you're in a project environment here. Like you said, you have specific processes that sort of project specific, and you find like the absolute pinnacle of processes in that project, and it works perfect, and everyone's on board, and you have everything in place, and it works like a charm, and then the project ends, and all those things sort of just gets canned because another project team, another project manager comes on board that takes the next project up, and you sort of lose all that knowledge and that ability to actually carry on with it. And sometimes it's merited. I mean, everyone has their own. I think every project manager that comes on board, every operational guy that comes, or any solution architect that comes on board, has their own way that they want to see a process happens. Yeah, sometimes I think a lot of valuable things gets lost that way. In our organization, we have a lot of tools that we use. We use a lot of collaboration tools, and I think it's key from that perspective to sort of transition this knowledge from one team to another. So we use a lot of Confluence, we use a lot of Jira, we use a lot of Slack and Trello and all that sort of things. So we try to combine all that tools in keeping all this information available to anybody that wants to, dig into it, say, I'm starting a new project. Is there something that, has been done in this type of domain that I'm going to do this in? And how was this project delivered? Mm-hmm. So that's where the enterprise side, I think, comes more into play. And, from a project point of view, obviously, there's a lot of things that ties into the enterprise as well, from a financial perspective, time sheeting and billing and costing and, strategy and all those sort of things. So it becomes quite important.
Yes. Yeah. Now over the last 20 plus years, obviously with technology moving at such a rapid rate, there's been, I guess, BPM solutions or software that have been brought to the market to help, I guess, in the documentation of processes initially. And now we're looking at things like process automation, process mining, process governance, all of these different, I guess, software solutions that are that organizations are using to help them effectively manage and improve their processes. But talk to me a little bit about, I guess, what the future looks like in that realm. Where are we heading, and what do you see as the solutions that are, I guess, on the doorstep, so to speak?
Yeah, it's difficult to say. I mean, there's so much happening, and like you said, there's so much dabbling in AI these days. I mean, AI is the new buzzword, and everyone is on board with it, and machine learning, and all these sort of things. So everyone is trying to do things that has been done, but only better by using all these sort of new, technologies that's out there. So I think it will become quite important going forward in process management as well. So these sort of things are going to start being applied to business process management. And I think the thing which first will happen is that the analysis side of whether something works or don't work, or a process fits into the right place, and it's actually either becoming a bottleneck of some sort, of those sort of things. I think that's probably where the main changes are going to lie. To actually take over the role of the business process manager, but to sort of enhance it, to give it a little bit more data, give it a little bit more bargaining power, change power, and those sort of things.
Yeah. So just before, I mean, you were talking about the I guess that senior management level, the CXO level, needing to value the tool and for them to see it as a strategic tool, or that aligns with the company strategically. Obviously, there are some organizations that they're using, they're looking at processes on a very, I guess, lower level, small scale, from it, whether it's in the different various projects, things like that. But would you say that BPM or process management is a strategic tool that senior management should value, and if so, why?
Well, to be honest, I think it depends. It depends on the strategy that you're trying to value. So if your strategy is to sort of enhance your current operations to a place where you're actually going to provide much more value to your customers by streamlining a process and making things getting quicker to them, making issues resolved quicker in that company, then absolutely. I mean, if that is the strategy to actually make that better, so that you outperform maybe your competition, then yes, that's part of the strategy. But I would say business process management most of the time goes much lower than that. For me, the pinnacle of business process management starts out with, I think, getting everybody happy on an operational level. Right. The reason for that is if you have everything well defined and you know what your business process is, then everybody knows what they need to do now, and everyone knows what they need to do and do next. And if you have that, then everyone sort of everyone just do what they need to do, and they do their work with highest quality and with reasonable ease.
Yeah, great. And now talk to me a little bit about, I guess, the making those incremental changes. Obviously, you're looking at on a day-to-day basis. You're looking at the processes within Accella, and obviously looking for where are those areas of inefficiency that we can improve. You've obviously got you can make incremental changes, looking at the daily tasks that we can, I guess, continually make them a little bit more efficient or effective, versus, say, radical innovation, where it might require more energy, time and effort, but the goal is to reduce something that takes 2 weeks and bring it down to 2 days or 2 hours or something like that. I guess over the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of disruptive businesses that have come to the table because they've worked out a way to do this model, but in a far more effective and I guess customer-centric way. You've got the Airbnbs and the Ubers and all of these organizations that they've looked at the process and they've and I guess you could say that's quite a radical innovation or transformation what they've done. So yeah, talk to us a little bit about the difference and the reason why where I guess incremental innovation plays a part versus the radical innovation.
Yeah, sure. I think incremental happens all the time. It's something that if you want your operations running smoothly, I mean, and if you think from an operational point of view, from an IT side of things change a lot every day. There's always a new tool that comes out. There's always a new cloud platform that needs to be used. There's always a new type of automation tool that the guys wants to evaluate and bring on board. So in our organization, it's the same thing. There's a lot of emphasis on automating the mundane things,
right.
Automating the things that the people has to constantly do, and scheduled tasks and those sort of things. So if you look at those sort of things, it becomes quite important to have your business process quite planned out. And not just that, but it needs to be evaluated often. It needs to be monitored. It needs to be audited to make sure that it's still doing the right thing. So because of what's happening on the background, because you don't have a person involved anymore if it's not constantly someone that's doing that task. So from our point of view, we are trying to automate as much as we can while keeping a firm hand on what is actually happening on the background. And if anything new rolls into that, we're trying to make it as dynamic as possible so that you can slot new tools into the tent, use it in current ways and use it to sort of take certain things that has been manually done in the past now to automate those as well. So everything is basically going down the route of automating everything at the moment.
Yeah, and a lot of organizations jump at that. They love the idea of automating everything that they're doing, and for some of them they're almost skipping the step, I guess, of understanding their processes first. Are they running as efficiently as they can? Are we automating good processes, or are we just automating crap? So talk to us a little bit about how you're, like, within Accella, you're ensuring that, like, we are, I guess, venturing or going down this sort of automating everything, or as much as possible, exercise. How are you ensuring that only the I guess the processes, there's some sort of governance around them? Are we ensuring that we're putting the best processes out there, and if not, how are we workshopping them to make sure that the business or the organization is going to benefit from this automation?
Yeah, look, it becomes very important when you start talking about larger organizations, and especially if you start talking about international type organizations where you have a lot of teams which sit in all different countries, all different time zones. They're all dealing with different aspects of the company in one way or another. So in the company I'm currently in, Accella, which I'm mostly dealing with quite a few teams all around the world. I mean, we're dealing at any given day with people in China, we're dealing with people in Ireland, we're dealing with people in the US, North and South America. So there's a lot of process involved in that to make sure that things doesn't drop through the carpet, or if someone drops the ball and some stuff just sits there. So I know our corporate, we have a corporate team that deals with rolling out and giving access to our software, and from an engineering perspective, who needs to have higher access so that they can get into the details of what has been done on certain things. So that becomes very important, having that central team that sort of deals with that side of things. And then pretty much having those tools, like what I talked before, having those tools on board to make it easy to, when a decision has been made, when something has been done, those sort of things is communicated to the right people at the right time. Yeah, from an international point of view, I think it's quite important having those things. And then more locally on our side here in Australia, you have to sort of take on that process, and then you have to sort of include your own little things that's important in your region. So it needs to adapt again, which is only probably add value in our region, but not in the global company itself. So yeah, it's in the end, I think when you do that, you sort of start dealing with two different aspects, two different processes sometimes, but you have to make them all work together.
Yes, yeah, right. And let's talk about the current climate that we're in right now, obviously with COVID-19. I'm not sure when everyone's listening to this, it'll be any time period over the next 6 months onwards, I'd imagine. But right now we're in the middle of COVID-19 or coronavirus, and obviously a lot of organisations have been disrupted by it. Some have been completely wiped out altogether, and some organisations are actually thriving right now, just because it's, I guess, playing to their advantage in some way or another. But talk to me about how, I guess, having well documented or managed processes is an asset during this time. And I guess how is it? I mean, I'm not sure what it's like for your organisation, but a lot of organisations have got all of their employees working from home, and senior management's all of a sudden like, hang on a second, how do we know what everyone's doing? How do we know what processes they're carrying out? And how do we know that when we get to the end of this, it's not going to be a huge pile of mess or rubbish that we're going to have to fix up or clean up because we didn't understand what they were doing. So talk to us a little bit about, yeah, I guess the value in knowing and understanding your processes in a time like this.
Yeah, sure. So I think this whole COVID-19 thing has given a very, very big boost for business process management, I reckon. I think it's a great time for that, because it has shaken just everyone awake. I think for the last 10 years, in working environments, we have basically have the ability to have people, working online. Having people, working from home in different locations. This whole remote thing has been there forever. And there's been a lot of push from smaller companies to sort of, not having that office space anymore, not having to pay for these sort of things, and having people working from home stuff. So for the larger organizations, they've been resisting this change probably for the last 10 years. So, and not because they want to resist it because they don't want to do it, they just don't want to deal with actually, implementing the processes, putting the stuff in place that actually makes everyone working from home viable. So I think this has changed it. So people are now realizing, and companies are realizing, that the thing that, we have been predicting is going to happen is now here, and it's already happening. And now you have to get on board, or those who doesn't is not going to make it very far. So it's an excellent time for processes to change, and you can see already a lot of the companies are already changing it. The other side of it is, I think there's a lot of people that wasn't expecting this to happen. So those ones who doesn't have clear processes, that doesn't have these things in place, they're struggling.
Yeah,
they're definitely struggling, and they would have to play very, very quick catch up to get their stuff in place and make those changes. So I think everyone will be putting a lot of focus managing those things, and not just the current processes, but people will start to think of, what if something like this happens again? Right. What if something else that disrupts our current way of doing business happens in the near future? So it's a good time for just taking some stock, doing an evaluation and see where can we make some conscious changes in our processes to handle these sort of situations that pops up like this.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the organizations that haven't really put stock in managing their processes, there's obviously a number of reasons or objections or resistance to it. And I think you mentioned just before that it's not a small task that can be undertaken. You know, it's not just let's flick a switch and tomorrow all of our processes can be managed and improved. But I guess talk to us a little bit about those objections and that resistance that someone might find if, let's just say there's someone listening right now that they really want to push for this, to have their processes managed and continuously improved. They can see the value in it. But they approach senior management and maybe it's somewhat of a foreign concept to them, or they haven't really seen the value in it. What are some of those objections or some of the resistance that an organisation might bring forward, or the senior management might bring forward, as to why they don't have the capacity or it's not a priority right now?
Yeah, look, I think one of the biggest objections is probably time. You know, do we have time to do this? Do we have the capacity, you know, to do this? How is it going to affect the current, you know, the business? How is it going to affect the current operations and the business? How long will it take to train everybody up? You know, so there's so many. Well, you can call it excuses, and it's valid. It's valid issues. But if you think about it, in the long run, you're trying to do that to actually improve everything, improve the working environment, improve the way that your operations flow, you know, improve the quality of the thing, you know, the things that you're trying to put out there and implement. To be 100% honest, I think the theoretical side of business process management is probably the thing that's sort of been where the value thing comes in. A lot of people go and they do a whole business process model, and they say, well, you go away for a year. They set up this whole, you know, business process model of how they see things work. They go down and they say, well, here it is, and then you know, 5 years later, the thing hasn't been implemented yet because no one sees value in it. Everyone is still doing their own thing. So that's where the waste, I think, comes into it. And that's why a lot of, I think, management is a little bit wary when it comes to making big changes. And I think that's where the value is in making small changes. Having your business processes changed inside an operational level. So the things that you change is immediately implemented. So you get immediately, you'll find and you'll get some feedback on it. Does it work? Doesn't it work? If it works, it's there. If it doesn't, you take it out and you do something else. It's very difficult managing any process if the process is just sitting in theory in some visual diagram somewhere. If you don't have the capacity to actually click on a button and say, you know, this process is how things work, and there's some Jira ticket that gets created somewhere for that process immediately, it's very easy to ignore that. And I think that's probably where what needs to be, from my perspective, that's what I'm trying to do. As soon as something changes, you know, something needs to happen in the background to force someone to do a step or force someone to do something in that specific circumstance. And that seems to work a little bit better. Right.
And what would you say that within Accella, what's the right ingredients that have come together that mean that the way you manage your processes and improve your processes it's an effective and valuable exercise? It's not something that has been scrapped, or it's not been something that has been maybe an initial project or exercise and then it's just been pushed aside to gather dust over the last 5 years. But I guess what is that the right ingredients that's been brought together that means it's an effective tool within Accella?
For me, I think that the most important aspect of any business process management is transparency. And if I talk transparency, I think transparency, you know, for everybody. Everyone who's going to have to either deal with this business process, needs to implement the business process or use this business process, needs to know exactly what's going on at any given point in time. So it's very important that if something is done, if something is changed, everybody knows about it. And not just that, but everybody has a visual on that. So if there's any objections, if there's any issues, everybody can, gather together and say, well, how do we fix this? How do we change this? Or, yes, it's an excellent one, that something has been put in place that actually works. So, transparency for me, I think that is probably the main aspect that we're trying to do is, with any changes, anything we're doing, we're trying to get as much eyes on things as we can.
Yes, great. And now, obviously, in today's conversation, you can only cover so much within 30 minutes. We can only scrape the surface, and I'm sure there are people that are listening right now that have learned a lot and gleaned a lot from your own experience, but maybe they want to learn. They want to continue that learning. Maybe they're within an organization where they don't have a very mature BPM framework. It's not really a focus of this organization, but they're, I guess, hungry to learn more about the area of BPM and how it can really add value to what they're doing. But I guess where would you point that person if they came to you and they said, Remo, I'm loving what you said in that interview, but I want to know more about effective process management. I want to understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how I can implement that into my organization. Where would you point that person or direct that person to?
Yes, sure. I mean, I don't come from a BPM background at all. So my look into a BPM into business process management is from the bottom up, and I sort of more from necessity than anything else that I got involved in that, because you need to start knowing what needs to be done and how can you do it and how can you make it better. I haven't done anything formal from business process management side. I pretty much just started learning of what is it that we're currently doing? What is it that is currently a huge pain point within the organization, and why are people complaining? And it's easy. You just go to the water cooler and you listen to what everybody says and what they complain about, and you know exactly where the changes needs to be, because everyone will tell you, in the water cooler what's going on. So if you sort of put your ears down there and you start listening to what the teams are actually saying, you start to get a gauge of, what is happening, what is those crucial processes and tasks and stuff that everybody's dealing with every day that's just excruciating. And then you just, you look into it and you see, how can I change it? What can we implement to make that easier? Is there any tools, that we can use? And there's always some tools, and not just for implementing tools, but I think sometimes tools are quite a useful way of, fixing some issues, especially from a business process management point of view. And then you just, that's where you start. You start with that, and you just deal with one issue at a time. And you just, after you're done with that, go to the next one and, document the stuff.
That's right. And I think that's so spot on. Like the best learning comes from the trial and error, from the actually doing it yourself, and in some cases feeling the pain of your mistakes, or seeing the value and the fruit, and I guess in some cases the joy it brings those people within the organization, that their I guess day-to-day operations is being improved and made easier. It makes for an easier I guess time for them while they're working. You don't want things to be complicated and confusing and for your employees. So I think that's great to really highlight the getting in there and starting working on the things that you're noticing in your organization that can be operated not on a theory level, but what's actually happening, and where can we start to see some immediate value. So I think that's great. But obviously, we can only cover so much in this conversation, but I'm sure people have learned a lot in the time we've had together. So, Remo, I just want to thank you so much for joining me and taking this time to have this conversation. I'm sure it's going to bless a lot of people.
No worries. You're welcome. Thanks, Daniel.